According to a recent IBM CEO study, Telco CEOs identify cybersecurity, productivity, and customer experience as their top priorities over the next 3 years. They also identify sustainability, talent, and cybersecurity as their top challenges. The technologies that are expected to deliver results and values outcomes for telco CEOs are capabilities such as IoT, analytics, and 5G. So today we are with IBM. I had the pleasure to be with a top executive. Rahul, please tell us about yourself.
Harold, thank you for inviting me here. Much appreciated. It's a pleasure speaking with you. So my name is Rahul Kumar. I'm a senior partner and global industry leader for telco and media industry for IBM Consulting. I get the pleasure of working with all of our key account team members and our clients across the globe. Within the industry, we go to market on some really key industry differentiated solutions centered around BSS, business support systems and care modernization, network and OSS transformation, and connected enterprise services or enterprise connected services, which form the basis for the growth for our CSP clients. Our view is, as you go to the next layer in terms of the cause and effect, you end up at three really core challenges every one of our CSP clients has. How do I reinvent my customer experience or my experience and relationship with my customers? How do I grow my revenues? Need to speed, agility. And how do I optimize my cost structure to be able to do things that will bring value, not just to my internal employees, but more importantly to my clients and customers.
How can today's telco CEO drive change and impact in the industry?
When you peel back the various layers of complexities, I think the CEOs need to drive this change. As they drive this change in the industry, they need to look at a few different components. One is the outside in view from a customer standpoint, inside out view from an employee and all the constituent and business partner standpoint, and then bifurcating the market into, let's say, B2C and B2B. Simple. Let's keep it simple. In order to drive this change from a B2C, from a consumer standpoint, the core pieces that CEOs need to think about is how are they positioning their enterprise and how are they structuring their enterprise to really deeply understand the needs of their consumers, and for that matter, B2B clients. How do they identify what's most valuable to each of these groups, B2B, B2C? From a consumer standpoint, what's really critical is the experience, the products and services that the consumers consume from telcos, the ability to impose or integrate with the latest of the technologies out there to increase the value back to the customers. So in those 3 or 4 dimensions, CEOs need to think about how do they address that or those components. I think the biggest one there, I know CSPs have been there for a long period of time. They know their products, they know their services, they know the connectivity the best. I think where they need to pay a little bit more attention and do some more work is to get into the heads of the consumers, to understand their core needs and to understand and design the experiences with the end customer experience in mind. When you get to the B2B segment, I think similar things apply. B2B has been one segment that has been underinvested in for a period of time. And now, as new technologies take shape in the form of 5G and edge and AI that's being proliferated now with the emergence of generative AI and what ChatGPT has done, putting the power of AI and the outcomes of AI into everybody's hands, what our CSP CEOs need to start thinking about is how do they use all these technologies and the intersection of these technologies to really address the challenges that are being faced by their enterprise clients.
Absolutely. I mean, there is the big challenge here is, okay, we have so many technologies. we were stormed by generative AI. Definitely the last 10 months, 11 months, I mean, it was crazy because every day we have single new applications and solutions based on these new technologies, on these emerging technologies. Where to invest first? Because as connectivity services become more commoditized, the opportunity for reinvention is massive thanks to technological innovation, as we mentioned, generative AI,
Absolutely.
and quantum computing also.
I think what CSPs, CEOs need to do is to get their organization to become adept at understanding, spotting, and working with these new technologies quickly. And in a manner that these can be integrated, starting with experimentation, obviously, proving the value, and then scaling it, but with a customer lens in mind, the end customer view in mind. So to answer your question around how do they reimagine operations to be customer first? I've heard so many CEOs start making changes as soon as they experience a glitch with interaction with their own support systems, right? Because right the next day there's a P1 ticket open. We got to change this right now because somebody high up in the organization had a bad experience. Even then, the thinking doesn't change. It's a fix that goes in and gets done. At IBM, we use this word very often: co-create, co-execute, and cooperate. It's our garage methodology of how we work collaboratively with our end clients without putting the constraints first. Oh, I'm only capable of doing this, so my process will end here. No, remove that constraint, imagine an unbounded experience, and then work with the right technologies to start enabling that experience. So that's how telcos can really become a customer first or customer first driven organizations.
How are operators thinking about generative AI, and how will we see many incorporated into their larger AI strategies?
Generative AI has been there for a long period of time. So the basis of generative AI are large models, foundation models as they are called. They've been in use for a long period of time. But what changed really was the technology was consumerized. AI has been there for a long period of time, but they've been in mostly, very specific projects being done within CSPs, other industries. The interaction that somebody has with a chatbot is probably the extent of consumerization that people experienced. But with ChatGPT, everybody started seeing the power of AI, and that has really accelerated the need to start understanding what this technology can do and how it can drive the right outcomes.
What are some of the biggest barriers for adopting generative AI for telcos and operators?
What ChatGPT has done is consumerized it, massified it. The value of generative AI is when it gets applied to enterprises, right? Enterprises like our telcos, who then apply it in support of their customers. The barriers that they're facing are as follows. Telcos have traditionally come from a space where when innovation happens, it gets rolled out slowly, not immediately. The challenge of what's coming down the pipe so rapidly, how do I quickly understand and start applying it on the fly, is one of the biggest first challenge, actually the first challenge I would say. I think the second challenge is, if I start, where do I start? What technology do I adopt, right? And if I adopt one technology, am I going to be able to pivot quickly if something better comes in? And so that's where the danger of getting logged into one specific provider or one specific model lurks large. What they want to think about is how do they select an architecture, an open architecture that will allow them to experiment with not just one, but multiple models, but still be consistent in terms of enabling a scaling of their efforts from experimentation to prove out to large-scale adoption. So that's point number two. The third big challenge, Harold, is around the data set. So just because the generative AI technology can provide some really good outcomes quickly, it doesn't mean that the data challenges that have been there since a long period of time go away. It's still based on the data. So the quality of data has still been very siloed within CSPs. They have started tackling that challenge over the last few years, but if the data sets are not curated, it's just not the availability of data, it's the right curation, right governance, then no matter how good the generative AI technology is, the outcomes are not going to be spot on. You see the risks associated with adopting generative AI if you don't have full control of what data has gone into train the model. So enterprises, when they're using things for internal consumption, yeah, the risk levels are lower. But if the outcomes of that generative AI are to be consumed by your clients and customers, you have to be very careful of what it is putting out there. So what architecture you adopt in terms of where does the model lie, where does the data reside, and how much of data can actually go back into whoever owns that model. I think those are, again, barriers to adoption. And the last one I'm going to end with this is the skills, the talent, and the culture. And the organizational structure needs to promote a lot of this inquisitive way of working, inquisitive way of thinking about how do we adopt this technology, being aware of the capabilities and the shortcomings so that we don't use it for the wrong reason, and how organizations promote this not just for the generative AI component of it, but technology in general. As we spoke about at the beginning of this session, this is not the last of massive technologies that we've seen, but it's that culture and the environment that organizations, CSPs create internally, which is going to help them gain the benefit from this technology and the next.
How does generative AI help with operator productivity?
Imagine the contact center. Calls are coming in. Today, agents, as they pick up a call, they're reading the history of the customer that they're talking to, what previous conversations have been at. And these are long summaries from previous interaction. And when they close the call, they have to spend time in noting down what exactly transpired during the call so that the next time the customer makes a contact, somebody else can read through it. Well, with the capability that generative AI brings in, these can be summarized very quickly in an automated manner so that the agent themselves don't have to scribble on a notepad first during the call and then type it back into the system. Through the call recordings, the summarization of the interaction can be very easily arrived at and inserted back into the CRM system. So your pre-call, post-call time decreases significantly because now you have to read the core part of what the interactions have been as opposed to long list of things. That's point number one. Once you do the analysis of these, coupling together the traditional AI now, so the power really comes from combining generative AI with traditional AI. You can start doing the analysis of all of these call summarization through traditional AI methods and start now figuring out what's going wrong. Why are people calling? And why are certain calls being misrouted? And as a result, lead to loss of productivity, loss of time that could be better spent doing more valuable work, right? So that's one small example in the customer care. And we have engagements with our clients where the clients have actually tried this out and they've identified millions of dollars in potential savings as they start making changes back into the processes. Think about how much development happens in CSPs, in different departments within CSPs. There are hundreds and thousands of applications that are out there. There are people who are creating code. What generative AI enables, another part of the capability, is to do a lot of things around productivity of a developer. Things like generating code from text automatically. If there are applications which are in a very old language or old technology, how can you systematically, programmatically convert that into a new language without typing in even a single keystroke? That's what generative AI can enable. On the network side, similar things. There are so many events that happen on the network side. With the combination of traditional AI and generative AI, anomalies can be detected very quickly. Predictions can be done on when things might go wrong. Proactive actions can be kicked off through summarization of the situation, identification or detailing out of the problem that's being predicted. And then again, using the orchestration element or automation element, the right steps can be taken in terms of finding out what's the most appropriate run book or playbook, as they call it, to execute in order to solve this problem or prevent this problem from being solved. And by the way, that run book also was auto-generated using generative AI based on the large corpus of data that the model got trained on.
What is an AI first telco organization? Or how can telco operators and communication service providers begin their generative AI journey and scale?
As new product services are being created or generated, as new applications, processes are being envisioned, AI is still seen as a novelty, that it's an afterthought. The design, the creation of whether it's the process, it's a product, is more from a function standpoint, keeping in mind the existing set of capabilities which don't think about AI. Once you do the first layer, first pass at the creation of the concept of the design, then you start thinking about, okay, now how can AI help me? Which points can I insert AI into? That's what we call as AI plus. So you add AI to your existing capabilities and you start creating something new, which is, by the way, beneficial, much better than without AI. With AI first thinking, what we are referring to is a complete shift in mindset where you do unconstrained thinking. And as you're realizing the concept, you start thinking of AI as an enabler right from the start. AI as a core, not even an enabler, a core portion of the tool set that you're going to use to enable these back to customer first, customer driven experiences, customer driven outcomes that you want to achieve. What we usually advise is to start off with a level setting briefing about what these technologies are, what they can do, and then get into a prioritization. Once that's done, then you start talking about some of the nitty-gritties, what models are you going to use? What architectures are you going to deploy? Are you going to use a standard model without any fine-tuning of the model? Are you going to use prompt engineering? How are you going to operationalize it? Once you do it, what changes in your current set of operations, methods, and procedures, processes will need to change, since generative AI is going to be doing a lot of augmentation of what humans probably used to do, or doing things a little different way. How do you incorporate that change into the fabric of your operations? How do you start redeploying that human capital? What skills you're going to need to sustain this level of innovation that you're now just starting the journey for? How do you change the culture now, getting back to the AI first thinking, customer first thinking, scaling this POC or the initial pilot activity into something that becomes an ingrained part of the fabric of the organization.
But connected with the telco industry, how does Watson X play a role in the telco industry? And how will generative AI impact telecom differently than other industries?
Right. And so you'll see that preview at MWC Las Vegas as well, coming back to your previous comment as well, where Watson X and the use cases that it can manifest would be on show, trying to showcase how do you deliver an exceptional customer care service, and how do you power dynamic AI-powered network automation for users. In terms of the usage for CSPs, Watson X becomes the platform for them to create, deploy, validate, fine-tune models. Again, as I said, back to the beginning of the conversation, one of the challenges CSPs face is, which model do I use? And usually what we have seen in the marketplace, providers of a particular model do not work well with another providers of another model. So in order to help our CSPs break that logger jam and invest in something that's open, that will allow them to work with multiple models from different providers, from open source community, from IBM, their own models, this becomes their development environment. This becomes the AI building environment. The Watson X data then enables our CSPs specifically to start using the massive amounts of siloed data that they have to bring that together in what is known as an open lake house architecture, the open data lake architecture, and start governing that data in a way that can be used to drive the outcomes through these models. And then the greatest part is the governance, Watson X governance, which ties all of this thing together in a governance layer that prevents the models from drifting, that prevents models from bias, brings the transparency into the outcomes that are generated, as well as provides the explainability of why the outcome is what it is.
Now, what do operators need to consider when incorporating generative AI, and what's most noteworthy to you in the differences in solutions available?
What works on data that's related to language may not work when it comes to images, creation of images, or when it comes to creation of code. It could be very different. So identifying the purpose for which you're trying to use generative AI is foremost. Then the challenge becomes, what model should I use? There are so many models out there. Some are proprietary models, some are open source models available on places like Hugging Face. We have a partnership with Hugging Face as well, where we expose all these open source models through Watson X. Then there are models from IBM, there are models from Microsoft, Google, others. How do CSPs determine which is the right model to use? Well, there are factors that go into that. As an example, cost. What's the cost of using those models? What is the assurance those model creators provide that the data that has been used is, as an example, I'm going to take example, it's not an exhaustive list, but clear of hate, profanity, clear of any copyright issues. What are the sources of the data? Can the model, through its output, go back, explain how they got that result, and go back to the data lineage of why it's saying this is the outcome based on what input data? What is the risk level that CSPs are open to taking? For example, when we talked about summarization of the call, as an example, Harold, summarization is an activity. If you don't expose any company data, all that the model is doing is just summarizing it. It's working on the provided data. It's not making up data from somewhere else. It's working on the enterprise provided data. I mean, that's a low risk proposition, and any model in a SaaS-based public cloud environment could work as an instance. But if there is customer sensitive data, which usually there is, together when you're talking about a call center transcript, does that model provide a private option of hosting? Network data is pretty confidential data, and it's a lot of data. It's massive data. Are you able, or are you willing to move that to a public cloud, or now do you want to use an on-prem model as an example, so that you keep the data within your firewalls, completely secure, and you can do massive amounts of data transfer from your core network onto your on-prem appliances, as opposed to transfer them back and forth through the cloud? So that's another consideration. And I think the biggest one, which I've been hearing some of our clients talk about, goes back to the risk associated with how dependable is the output, right? And that's where the more that providers of generative AI capabilities include transparency and ethics and explainability in the outcomes, better our CSPs would be able to judge and move towards the right solution option for themselves.
What's next for IBM Consulting, and how they help change the way enterprises operate in the telco space?
There's a lot to be done in this field. It's just the tip of the iceberg, as they say. The operationalization and infusion of this generative AI capability into the day-to-day working is going to take a bit of time. And that's what IBM Consulting is ready with, to work side by side with our clients in any capacity. Because as I mentioned, CSPs have a range of capabilities. Some don't need any help. They have the right engineers. They have the right people who understand this. And there, it's where IBM Consulting comes in, is maybe in helping them work together to define or understand what the right models are, what the right technology, what the right supplier should be. But in others, it could be the whole 9 yards, from advisory to helping them create the proof of concepts, deliver outcomes, and then scale. I think the key portion, which is going to take a little bit of time, as we have seen from previous cycles, is once you prove the value, once you prove the outcomes, how do you institutionalize this new way of operating? How do you scale the use of generative AI across the enterprise?
Thank you very much for your time for today. I mean, we can continue talking more and more, because this is, I mean, your passion is contagious also. And, but I mean, there is a lot of insight here for discussing with the telco industry. And I think we will have the time to do that also in MWC in Las Vegas, and in future meetings also, in future events, because this is a constant change that we are experiencing and affects every single industry, and in particular the telco industry. So thank you very much for your time.
Harold, thank you so much for this opportunity. It is a topic that I'm really passionate about. It is changing the face of our earth. And yes, you mentioned MWC. We have a presence there. IBM has a presence there. So to all the listeners, please stop by if you're in Las Vegas during the MWC Las Vegas show.
Absolutely awesome, and certainly that will be great, and we will do that. So thank you again. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Harold. Pleasure.